There were 5 people executed in Washington. This is part 2 of the series. Charles Rodman Campbell, May 27, 1994. The state of Washington put Charles Rodman Campbell to death by hanging for a triple murder he had committed in Clearview in 1982. Later, DNA evidence connected him to another murder that occurred in 1975. Between 1971 and 1972, Campbell was housed at the Green Hills School in Washington. He was described as a young man who fell between the cracks and was thought to be occasionally exuberant yet elusive. Renee Wickland, 23, was attacked by Campbell in December 1974 while she was working in her yard outside of her Clearview, Washington home. At knife point, he forced her to have oral sex with him and threatened to kill her infant daughter Shanna if she refused. Wickland complied with his demands, and when he left, she called the police. It wasn't until 1976 that Campbell was captured, as she identified him during a police lineup. Since local law enforcement had known Campbell since he was a little child, they were not shocked. Wickland and her neighbor Barbara Hendrickson gave detailed testimony of the assault during the ensuing trial, and Campbell was found guilty of first-degree rape and given a 40-year jail sentence. Wickland was unaware that Campbell's punishments flowed simultaneously rather than sequentially. This implied that he would be eligible for parole after 7 years. In the end, Campbell's exemplary behavior led to his release in 1981. His discharge was not disclosed to his victims. In the years that followed, Wickland had gone through a divorce from her spouse Jack because of the aftermath of the attack and focused entirely on raising her daughter. She also helped students get loans for beautician school and supported herself and Shanna through her home-based accounting business. Jack Wickland was the victim of an odd incident in December 1977 when he was discovered in his West Seattle house, bound to a chair, suffering from severe third-degree burns. He said that a stranger came to his residence, bound him, doused him in gasoline, and lit him on fire. He was killed 5 months later when his car collided with a tree. It is unknown exactly how Jack Wickland died, and authorities were never able to conclude with any degree of certainty whether he killed himself or he was in fact murdered. Don, the husband of Barbara Hendrickson, discovered Renee, her 9-year-old daughter Shanna, and his wife, all of whom had their throats slit, when he went to Wickland's residence on April 14, 1982. The following week, Charles Campbell, who was living in a halfway home at the time, was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder and second-degree larceny because, only hours before the crimes were discovered, he had tried to sell some of Renee Wickland's valuables. The crime scene was described as resembling a massacre by the police. Wickland's corpse was bare. She had been brutally beaten, strangled, and had her throat cut. Neither the murder weapon nor the object used to rape her were ever located. In addition, Wickland exhibited bruising on her knuckles that seemed to be from defensive wounds. After going over to the house to see how Wickland was doing, she had been sick with the flu that week, Barbara Hendrickson was attacked and had her throat cut. When Shanna got home from school, she experienced the same thing. She had suffered a severe cut to her throat, almost resulting in her decapitation. She had a set of earrings on that day, and the killer had taken them, so one of her earlobes was also ripped. Campbell made an attempt to assay another woman on the day of the killings. A neighbor girl reported to police that she had seen Campbell skulking around Wickland's yard that morning, brandishing a knife, and other neighbors had seen him walking toward the home while holding a big roll similar to a blanket. Additionally, it was clear that Campbell made a very careless and transparent escape from the crime scene. Renee Wickland's jewelry was found trailing down the walkway from the front door of the house, and a bloody handprint matching his fingerprints was discovered on a drinking glass in the Wickland's kitchen. Shanna's earring was discovered on the back seat of Campbell's vehicle, and the driver's side door handle had dried blood on it. When Campbell was detained, Renee's earrings were discovered in his jeans pockets. Police were led by a fellow work-release resident to a spot he and Campbell had been on the evening of April 14 near the banks of the Snohomish River. Divers recovered more jewelry and trinkets that had been taken from the Wickland residence. On April 19, Campbell was taken into custody at the Monroe Reformatory and accused of first-degree murder. Being incarcerated in the Snohomish County Jail, he was disliked by his fellow inmates due to his child murdering history and the fact that his crime meant that people on parole would be subject to more stringent regulations. In 2023, DNA evidence indicated that Campbell was most likely the culprit behind the unsolved April 1975 murder of University of Washington student Hallie Ann Seaman. Campbell declined to give a defense testimony or even to address the murders at his trial in November of 1982. Prosecution witnesses included his girlfriend, Judy Dirks, who stated that he had been at her house the morning of the deaths and had finished a six-pack of beer, as well as neighbors who had witnessed him prowling around the property on April 14 in the afternoon. Judy Dirks discovered one of her kitchen knives was gone the following day. During Campbell's work release, Dirks stated in court that Campbell had driven past Renee Wickland's house a few times and harbored considerable resentment towards her. It was discovered under cross-examination that Campbell tried to convince his girlfriend to say that he had never expressed his desire to hurt Renee Wickland. Other than arguing that the case was a miscarriage of justice and that investigators should have looked for the other possible suspects before focusing on Campbell, the defense did not call any witnesses or provide any supporting documentation. Many Clearview residents had signed a petition calling for his execution, and the jury decided that was a fair punishment, noting that he had shown no remorse at all for killing the Wicklands and Barbara Hendrickson. Campbell was largely disconnected throughout the trial. He was not visibly moved by the autopsy or crime scene images either. North Dakota-based Renee Wickland's mother and sister were especially horrified by the killings, since she had never disclosed to them that she had been assayed 8 years prior. This next info will shock you. Campbell's lawyers contended throughout the trial that he could not be prosecuted for assay because Renee Wickland's private area wound was a post-mortem injury that had not bled. So they were basically claiming that since the victim was probably dead, then the assay is not valid. According to coroner Dr. Clayton Haberman, she may have been alive when the assault occurred because brain death does not manifest until several minutes after circulation stops. Additionally, he mentioned that Shanna lost so much blood that getting a sample from her was challenging. Juror Dennis Britt instructed the jury to ignore the charges of assay. Yeah, I couldn't believe this either. Additionally, the prosecution's choice to show graphic autopsy images was objected to by the defense. This was allowed by Judge Britt, who added that the jurors were free to determine whether they wished to view the victim's clothes covered in blood. Campbell, the only witness to the killings, refused to talk about or describe what happened. Detectives had to piece together the events of April 14 in rough chronological order. It was clear that Renee Wickland had been attacked first. Before slicing Shanna's throat, it was thought that Campbell had shown the girl her mother's lifeless body in the bedroom next to her. By the time Barbara Hendrickson entered the house, they were most likely already dead. The living room's broken furniture suggested that she might have encountered Campbell and tried to run away, only to be apprehended. The bodies were all arranged in a way to intentionally shock whoever came across them. On December 17, 1984, the judge imposed the death sentence on Campbell. Campbell's attorneys filed 3 appeals in total, contesting his conviction over a 12-year period. Despite being against the death penalty, then-Governor Mike Lowry declined to commute Campbell's sentence to life in prison after learning of the specifics of his offenses. Campbell had his final shower 24 hours prior to his execution. 2 hours before the hanging, his last meal was served, and he declined to consume most of it. The victims' families requested to see the execution, but their request was denied. When authorities tried to take Campbell to a holding cell close to the execution room the day before his death, he refused to comply. He was discovered unconscious on his cell floor by the officer, who used pepper spray to finally incapacitate him. In his last hours, Campbell spoke with friends and family, including his son and former therapist. Campbell's hanging was the second in 2 years, following the execution of child killer Wesley Allen Dodd. I covered his case in part 1 of People Executed in Washington. Campbell would not stand on the execution platform. He had to be physically restrained to a board by corrections officers. Campbell shook his head continuously, making it impossible to put on the robe or the noose. Before the trap was activated, jail guards needed 90 seconds to secure the noose and throw a hood over his head. Campbell was declared dead after roughly 2 minutes. His cervical spine injury was the cause of his rapid death, according to an autopsy. There were 3 more people executed in the state of Washington. We will take a look at their stories in the next video. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.